Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Hello and welcome to another episode of Living the Dream with Curveball. I'm your host, Curveball, and today I am joined by a Hall of Fame speaker, best-selling author, world-class wheelchair athlete, as well as the president of his own communication company, Chad Hymas. Chad, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Curtis. Great to be here, buddy.
Absolutely. Why don't you start off by telling everybody a little bit about yourself, maybe where you're from, and anything you might want the listeners to know before we get started?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Curtis, again for having me. I'm out of Salt Lake City, Utah, about 45 minutes southwest of Salt Lake. Shondell and I have been married for 26 years. We have 4 children. Two are biological, and two are adopted. Shondell and I, after having the biological children, I was injured. We live on a big ranch. I was injured on the ranch and broke my neck. After that, we were unable to have children, and so we adopted a beautiful little girl from Guatemala. And then just recently, we got a boy who was 9 when we got him. He's 11 now, from Ethiopia. So there's our family of 4 right there. The boys are 22 and 21, and so they're a little older. And after the accident, I started traveling the world and writing books and doing research and on leadership, mastering change, developing leaders. And so I've written 4 best-selling books, and we still have the ranch today, and have been traveling up to COVID. So since COVID, everything's been done in our studio and here on the ranch, and just wrapped up a virtual presentation right before you and I came online here tonight, and grateful that we're able to do this.
Well, let's talk about your accident. How did it happen? And I also know that someone very important that you looked up to influenced you to even start speaking. Kind of talk about that and your experience in the hospital room when that person came to visit you when you didn't expect it.
You bet. I think that's probably a good place to start. I a couple months before my accident, my dad went to his insurance company meeting in Dallas, Texas. My dad was an insurance salesman, and they bring all their top reps in to receive further development and personal growth. And my dad came home from that event, and he was just he was a different person. He was awestruck, and one of the things that my dad had done while he was at that meeting that is not conducive of my dad. It's not like my dad to do this. He bought this speaker. There was a speaker on the platform that he was really inspired by. And my dad, because he was inspired by this speaker, bought his book and his VHS tape. So that's how long ago this was. This was prior to DVDs back in back in the late 1990s, 2000s. And so dad bought his VHS tape, and my dad tried to get me and Shondell and my brothers and their spouses to go watch this VHS tape and watch this guy. And we never made it happen. It was just, sadly, we just found ourselves too busy, and you'd think we would be better kids than that, but we weren't at the time. And we just never made it over to watch this video that my dad so anxiously wanted us to participate with him in. And so, long story short, a couple months later, my dad's oldest son would end up breaking his neck on the farm. Maybe that's a story for a couple minutes from now. That would be me. I would end up breaking my neck, and when you're in a hospital after you wake from a coma and you're unable to move 95% of your body, you really don't have a choice as to what your dad puts in the VHS machine for you to watch, or the DVD player to watch. And so again, this was a VHS tape. So my dad puts this tape in finally for me to watch, and that's when I saw this guy for the first time. And this guy was also in a wheelchair. He was speaking on a platform. His hands were curled like mine. His legs didn't move. He contorted his body the way that I contorted mine back in the hospital. We had a lot of commonalities. Of course, remember, when my dad purchased this, he had no idea that his oldest son was going to become similar to this man on the platform. My dad had no idea whatsoever. I mean, how could you project such a thing? And so that's what I was watching. And I wasn't so much inspired by the guy's words as I was inspired by his attitude, his happiness. And I found out he was married. He had adopted 2 children and almost a third. And so I needed more. I mean, I loved watching him on this tape. I couldn't get enough, and so I needed more drugs. That when I say drugs, I'm talking about the tape. I mean, I found out his name was Art Berg. I needed more Art Berg. I mean, he just made me feel good and felt like maybe I could accomplish something with my life. So that, my dad only had the one tape, so he called up Art's office and ordered more, and got, I think my dad ordered everything Art had in his portfolio for sale. And so what we didn't know is that Art was going to deliver it himself to the hospital, and that took place the very next day. And so that was I even get emotional thinking about it, today. To believe that somebody would do something like that, and play the postman and deliver not just the product that my dad had purchased, but to deliver himself as a opportunist for service and selflessness. And when he wheeled his chair into my room, of course I knew who he was, and so I kind of lost it, and I was honored by his presence, and I knew this guy was world renowned and a best-selling author. And he hopped up onto my bed, and that was kind of interesting to watch. A guy with no arms jump up onto my bed with no legs. I say jump because he literally just used his biceps and used the technique to get himself up onto my hospital bed. And it was up. It wasn't a level or down. It was an up transfer. He just sat there and visited with me for a little bit and showed me some things that he could do to get dressed and undressed. And he left, and that was it. And he left me all of that material to watch and to read, and a signed poster. And so for the next several months, I watched those tapes, and it was my drug, my daily dose of drugs. I needed Art Berg every day, and I watched him. And back then there wasn't social media like Facebook and Instagram or LinkedIn. You only could follow somebody by their face or by their website, and so it was artberg.com. And I found out that he was a speaker, and he traveled the world and was a best-selling author, and married a beautiful gal by the name of Dallas. And they had those 2 adopted children. They were adopting a 3rd child, and Art and I became friends. We communicated via phone and via email, and he came out to our ranch and saw what dream I was building, and saw where I was hurt on the farm. And he even invited Shondell and I and our family over to his house. And so he went to his house in Alpine, Utah, and spent the night there, just kind of visiting with him and his wife, and got to know a little bit more about him. And Art, that year was 2001, 2002. That year, the Baltimore Ravens won the Super Bowl. And the reason why they come into play is because Art was a coach and a facilitator, inspirational speaker for the Baltimore Ravens. And because they won the Super Bowl, he was given a Super Bowl ring that year. And that was the first year that Ray Lewis was in the Pro Bowl, number 52 for the Baltimore Ravens. Awesome guy. And so Art had Pro Bowl tickets. And so he invited Shondell and I to go to Hawaii, where the Pro Bowl is played, to watch Ray Lewis play. And so when a guy invites you that's a mentor of yours and an idol that you kind of look up to, and to go to Hawaii, it's kind of hard to say no to that. So Shondell and I went with Art and his family to Hawaii, and we watched the Pro Bowl. And that was on February 16th, 2002. And we got home on February 17th, 2002. And on February 19th, 2 days later, is when I got the phone call that Art had passed away in his sleep. He had an allergic reaction to medication, and we lost him. I've never experienced a loss like that before, and so I didn't know what to do. I went outside and I pushed my wheelchair down the road as best I could. It wasn't a busy road because we live out in a rural area, so I just kind of by myself. And that's when it hit me that I wonder if I could fill a void that the world was now filling, and maybe not replace Art, but kind of fill that gap. And so that's when I started speaking and traveling the world. And that was the beginning of a career that's now lasted over 21 years, 89 different countries on all 7 continents, and at least all 50 states 20 or 30 times, something like that. And I don't say that to be arrogant or narcissistic or boastful. I'm quite humbled by it, because all I've wanted to do is to be a farmer. I mean, I broke my neck on the farm. I just didn't know that a farm would be the whole world and that I'd be farming people. And so it's been a real blessing. It's been a real joy to serve and to get to know people. And it's been an honor to try and honor art by the way I live my life. And so that's the story of how I was mentored by somebody in the hospital. The accident is a whole new ball game. Curtis, I don't know if you want me to share that or not, but
Yeah, go
I
ahead. And also, if you know how Art was injured, share that too. I think this is important to let
yeah, I
people
mean,
know.
Art was injured on his way to get married. I mean, Art was on the way to the church house to get married in Salt Lake, and he was traveling from California to Salt Lake City. Him and his wife were going to get married in a Latter-day Saint temple. And long story short, it's about a 12 to 14-hour drive from San Jose to Salt Lake. And so about 2 o'clock in the morning, they switched drivers, and Art went in the passenger seat, and the driver took over, and they were buckled in. And the driver, one of Art's best friends, got a little tired and overcorrected and flipped the car. And despite the fact that Art was wearing a seatbelt, he was ejected from the vehicle, and that's how he broke his neck and became a quadriplegic. So he was married to the same lady that he was going to get married to, but they waited 18 months after his injury. So he married. So I think that's kind of inspirational in and of itself, right there. And so that's how Art got hurt. Me, on the other hand, I did something much more stupid. I mean, I was April 2001 when I got a phone call from my wife on a Tuesday morning that my youngest son, Kyler, who was 1 at the time, so the boys were 3 and 1, the same boys that I told you were 22 and 21. Kyler was 1, and he'd just taken his first 2 steps, and my wife had asked me to hurry home so that I could see him walk for the first time and play ball with him in the garage. I told my wife that I would hurry, but I had to stop by the field to feed our elk. We raise elk and horses and cattle. I told my wife that I would stop by the field and then I'd be home to play ball. And I raced to the field. I got out of my truck, hopped onto a tractor. I loaded up a bale of hay that weighs more than most pickup trucks. And that's when I had a problem. My tractor the red light was flashing on the dashboard of my tractor, which was an indicator that my hydraulic tank was low. And I saw that, but I chose not to fix that problem. And that's when the bale of hay released from the hydraulic forks because the forks were loose. And the bale of hay rolled over backwards and it landed on my body, punching my head through the steering wheel. The shaft went through my mouth, breaking everything in its path. It broke all the bones in my neck and severed 95% of my spinal cord. And that's where my new life was to begin. So that's how I was injured. And I would come to meet Art about 3.5 weeks later. So
Now, when you were injured like that, how were you able to get help? Did somebody find you, or
yeah, I
how were
was
you?
found 48 minutes later. That's a good question, Curtis. I was not. I was fully coherent. I was trapped underneath, a pickup truck, um, or that equivalent to a pickup truck. And so, I was found 48 minutes later by my wife and my children when I didn't show up at home to play ball. They drove about a mile away up to the hay yard. She found me after dark in the headlights of her vehicle. The tractor was still running. Of course, there was blood on the dirt floor and on the tractor tires. I just couldn't give her a response that I was alive. And so she went back home and called 911. And I was then discovered by 5 cowboys that were first responders and 3 Utah State patrolmen, 8 people that lifted that bale off my body. They cut the shaft with a sawzall, taped it to my mouth, and I was flown via helicopter to a hospital and went in for immediate surgery.
Wow, that's an amazing story. Now, let's talk about your speaking accomplishments because you have a lot of accomplishments. You're a Speaker Hall of Fame. You are actually an elite speaker, and you're serving on the board in Utah for speaking. So just kind of talk about some of your accomplishments and explain to people what a Speaker Hall of Fame is, because I never heard of it.
Yeah, I don't relish too much on that. Although I am grateful to be a member of that, and it's an honor to be called. I think there's 81 living members that are Speaker Hall of Fame or members of the Speaker Hall of Fame. There are 20 members of the Speakers Roundtable, which is an invitation only group, and you're a member for life once you're inducted and invited to be part of that. Once you're inducted in the Speaker Hall of Fame, you're a member forever. And so those are, I guess those are accolades and accomplishments from from being recognized by your peers and by others that vote you in, similar to the Hall of Fame in athletics or perhaps baseball or basketball. They nominate 5 in a year, and but aside from that, I mean, aside from those accolades in the books, I think the greatest credit is that I never I'm still married to the same girl, and I'm still alive today to be able to watch my kids grow up and to play ball and to try and be a better person, amidst a crisis and a pandemic. Right now, during this time in our lives, we're going through a crisis called COVID-19, where people are isolated and not able to go where they want to go or do what they want to do. I know what that feels like. I mean, being in a wheelchair, even though I can't feel my hands, I use my biceps to push and numb hands and calloused hands to push a chair, and I relate that to COVID in that I try and teach people about perspective. And so I think that me sharing that message, even when there wasn't COVID-19, prior to March 2020, when we all found out that COVID was coming our direction and we all got hit pretty quick and pretty fast with COVID, that message has been resonating with people for the last 20 years. And that's kind of what's taken me across the world, is relating that to safety organizations that use MSHA and OSHA, and having a safety related message, because I took a shortcut that night when I broke my neck and I skipped a pre-op on my piece of equipment. I also refused to listen to the warning signs on my tractor. So I teach a lot about that. I talk a lot about leadership and how leadership is not done by title or given because you're called a leader or because you have a child. That doesn't make you a parent. It's done by the way that we live our lives and how we act. And so I do a lot of leadership training and keynote speeches, and I've written a couple of books on leadership and safety. And then I do also do a lot of adapting to change and helping people adapt and cope with change. And so that's where my consulting firm comes in, as we talk about adapting to change, which is very pertinent in today's world, especially amidst a political year, an election year, and also adapting to change as it pertains to a crisis with COVID-19. So anyway, that's how the speaking has transpired.
Absolutely. And let's talk about your wife, because I know you kind of talked about how at first you were kind of nervous or didn't really want her to see that you were having a hard time doing stuff. How did you adjust, and how did she adjust to going to being a perfectly normal person to all of a sudden, you're paralyzed now?
Yeah. So maybe first we'll just, when it comes to Shondell, you just don't find better than her. She's adjusted really well. You talk about me adjusting. It's been 21 years and I still haven't adjusted. I mean, I'm Curtis. I just don't like her help. I didn't say I'm not grateful for her help. I'm totally grateful. I am grateful. I'm grateful that I have her. I just, I know when we get married, we say something like for better or for worse. Nobody plans on the woman of their dreams helping them shower. I know it sounds like fun. It's not fun, Curtis. No one plans on the woman of their dreams helping them get dressed. I know it sounds like fun. It's not fun. And so for me, it's, me traveling around the world has probably been my drug of choice again, as to escape from having to have the woman that I love help me, as selfish as that sounds. And so, while that does sound selfish, I want you to know that during this time of a pandemic and a crisis and COVID, it's been a blessing for me to learn how to be a better husband and to actually be authentically grateful and not just have to say it and then leave and fly away and have somebody that I'm not in love with. While I do love people, I'm not married to them, and have Shondell help me, because while I can take care of myself and I do travel alone, it does take me a while. Shondell likes me to let her help me, which gets things done rather quickly, and then I can go spend time with the kids, and that's what she prefers to happen. And so part of what I teach is surrendering and not always having to be right. And that concept and principle has resonated with me in my life and has helped me to have a better relationship with Shondell and our children, and play a role that otherwise wouldn't have been played.
Absolutely. Let's talk about you being a recognized world-class wheelchair athlete. How did that come about, and what are you best known for? Tell us about going from Las Vegas to Utah.
Yeah, so it was actually from Utah to Las Vegas, and that was also inspired by Art Berg. What many people probably don't know is Art Berg set a world record in his wheelchair back in 1992 when he pushed from Salt Lake to St. George, Utah, so northern Utah to southern Utah, 325 miles. And that inspiration came from that marathon. So a couple years after Art passed away, I decided to give that an attempt. Only I was going to push from Salt Lake to Vegas, 513 miles, and that accomplishment took place in about 11 days, about 53 to 54 miles a day. And when I crossed the finish line 11 days later, I remembered what Art taught me in the hospital was true when he said, while the difficult takes time, the impossible just takes a little bit longer. And that phrase has resonated with me my entire life since I've known Art. While the difficult takes time, the impossible just takes a little bit longer. And so that's where the world-class wheelchair athlete comes in, and that world record still holds true today. And I'm in Guinness for being the only quadriplegic that travels alone, and so that's kind of cool. But I think that resonates with everybody in that I'm not in Guinness because I'm stronger. I'm not in Guinness because I have more money or because I'm better than anybody. It's all my mind and my mindset and what I believe that I can do. And so I try and help people and coach and consult with people that they need to be very careful with what their belief system is, because what they believe drives their actions, and actions will drive the results that they get. So if I were to believe that I'm paralyzed and that I can't be married and that Chandel and I can't have children and that I can't be a good coach and I can't be a very good father and I don't deserve to be married and Chandel shouldn't have to help me get dressed, if I were to believe those things and constantly let them be in my mind, hence my actions, then the results would probably be divorce and unhappy and unsuccessful and unproductive. And so I really try and focus hard on what I do have and having a positive belief system and being grateful for what I do have. And when I focus on that, then I'm able to get dressed by myself and work harder to be more independent and provide for my family and see my kids grow up and do those things that perhaps God would want me to do anyway.
Absolutely. Now, are you still doing marathons or anything athletic in your wheelchair? And by the way,
Not not anything different than just daily exercise. Just push you after you when you get close to 50 years old. Just pushing a wheelchair is exercise enough for me. And so I just try and watch what I eat, and I do watch it. I watch the ice cream. I watch the popcorn. I mean, I literally look at it before I eat it. I'm an ice creamaholic. I love ice cream, and but no, I try. I got to watch my weight because people have to help me get in Uber vehicles or taxis or limousines or whatever, and when I get on airplanes, I always find someone at the airport to help me get loaded on an airplane, and they got to lift me up. And so I try and keep my weight at a manageable weight, around 170 or so, because I'm 6'3", so I can be lifted up and carried to the seat. And people are always so generous with their strength and their abilities to help and be kind to me and serve me. I try not ever misuse that or abuse that. But I am grateful for people around the world that have helped me to get to where I need to go and where I need to be. And people have been very gracious that way.
absolutely. Now let's talk about your books. Just kind of give us a brief breakdown and kind of a synopsis of what each book is about and where they can be purchased from.
So my books are all over the internet. Our best-selling book is Doing What Must Be Done. That's a great book that was co-written by Thomas Cantrell, a very prolific and profound master of words, and just a great mentor for me as well. So he helped me write that book and was really the man behind the magic. And that book has been translated into different languages and sold all over the world. We also have a couple other mini books, Big Trouble, which is a safety-oriented book because I do a lot in the safety industry. And then we have one called Soaring to New Heights, and then one that's called Who Needs Legs When You Have Wings. And so those are our four best-selling books. There's been a couple of DVDs that are now we don't even use DVDs anymore, Curtis. What's happening to our world? Now everything's on video and Netflix, right? You just pull it off the internet. And so our videos are downloadable on the internet as well. So it's you can find them on Netflix and on audiobooks And just Google my name, Chad Hymas, ChadHymas. So you can find free videos there, free content, different topics that you can use when you're teaching adults or teaching children. There are also great context and content on better using words to teach and speak in front of people and public audiences. I do a lot of that coaching as well, and so they can find information on that just by looking up under my name.
Are there any upcoming projects that you're working on? Any speaking engagements, whether they be virtual or in person? Any more books coming out?
I mean, we're busier now than we've ever been during COVID. I mean, we're doing tons of virtual work. I'm still flying and traveling, just not 25 days a month. That's cut way back. There's a lot of states right now, as you well know, that are shut down. A lot of countries that are under tight restrictions, and so the flying and the gathering of people around the world has been almost mute because of this disease and this virus that is spreading around the world so rapidly. We're now into the 10th month of that disease, and they have a vaccine that's now spreading around and being passed around, and people are trying to get vaccinated as quickly as possible. They're trying to get that into people's arms as soon as possible so that we can get back to a life. What I don't like to say back to where we were, because I think we need to grow from where we've been, but back to a life where we can at least gather together again as people. Because I believe as people, we're social people. We're not a social distancing people. And so once we get back to that point, we'll start up again and get back to gathering and getting people together. But until then, we're just doing a little bit of traveling and coaching in small groups, and doing most of our stuff with larger groups via the virtual platform and the virtual studio.
Do you have any podcasts or anything that people can check out?
Yeah. Our podcast is Influence with Chad Hymas. And then, of course, I do a lot of guest podcasts, kind of like what I'm doing with you today. And so, again, if they just look up podcast Chad Hymas, I think we've done over 100 different podcasts where we've been a guest on other people's podcasts, like tonight, and I really enjoy doing those.
Yeah, I originally heard you being interviewed by Randy Gage because I interviewed him as well, and I heard your story, and I was like, wow, I need to get him on.
Yeah, Randy's incredible. Randy's a great person to follow and to be mentored by. I really enjoy Randy Gage's podcast, and he's a fellow speaker and also in the Hall of Fame, and he's been great to be able to watch and learn from.
Absolutely. Are there any other topics that we haven't discussed or touched on that you would like to talk about?
I think there's a bunch, buddy. You and I could go on for hours. I want to leave it an open window for people to go and just Google and look up Chad Hymas and see what their needs are. As everybody has different needs, and there's a lot of content there. And feel free to reach out to us and reach out to my office. We always respond back, and I always like to respond back as much as I possibly can in person. And so the office does forward information to me frequently, and so I'd love to stay in contact with people. They can look me up on social media. I do my own social media, Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn, or YouTube, and it's just Chad Hymas. If they just Google my name, they'll find it.
And they'll also find your website as
well. My website's just my name, chadhymas.com. You're right. There's a lot of good videos on the website as well that are all free.
Absolutely. Chad, I want to thank you so much for coming on. And listeners, after listening, please make sure to rate, subscribe, and review. Chad, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Curtis. Appreciate everything, buddy.
For more information on the Living the Dream podcast, visit www.djcurveball.com. Until next time, stay focused on living the dream.